And he put one stone in front of the Kaaba, and this is the Hubal. And then from this, people began proliferating idols. How so? Well, the first thing that they did is that they began worshipping, this is really interesting, they began worshipping the stones that the Kaaba was built with. How so? We learn from the traditions that whenever a caravan left Mecca, they would chip away and take a rock from the Kaaba. And they would take this rock as being equivalent to an idol. And wherever they went, they would then put the rock there and then worship this stone. What was the stone? The building blocks of the Kaaba. Now, we as Muslims, this is something a lot of people don't think about, we don't consider the bricks of the Kaaba to be sacred and holy. The bricks of the Kaaba are just clay and sand. It is the location that is holy. It's not the marble of the floor. It's not the silk covering of the Kaaba. It's not the bricks that the Kaaba is used to build with. It is the place that Allah created. And the Kaaba, a lot of people don't know this, is rebuilt every few decades. It's just like any structure. How long does a building last? You know the last reconstruction of the Kaaba, who can guess when it happened? The current Kaaba that we see now, who knows when was this Kaaba built? The people who live and visit frequently know, around 10 years ago. The current Kaaba is literally only 10 years old, that's it. There is nothing holy about the Kaaba. It is the area, it is the land of Mecca that is sacred. The Kaaba comes and goes, and after another 50 years, it's going to grow weak, the foundations are going to be crumbling, they're going to have to rebuild it. But the people of the Mecca at the time, they didn't realize this. They let paganism seep in. So they would take bricks of the Kaaba and then they would worship those bricks. And of course, this is the stepping stone to idolatry. Another Sahabi who accepted Islam, Abu Raja al-Utaridi. Abu Raja al-Utaridi mentions that before Islam came, we used to worship rocks and stones. Hadith is in Sahih Muslim. We used to worship rocks and stones. And if we found a rock that looked more beautiful than the rock we were worshipping, we would throw that rock away and put the other rock in its place. And if we were traveling in the desert and we couldn't find a rock, listen to this, we would gather some sand, put it into a pile, bring a goat, squeeze some milk out of it to make the sand firm, and then do tawaf around that sand. Now, wallahi, it is mind-boggling to think intelligent people will do this, but if you go to some countries on earth, I'm not going to mention anything here because people might get offended, but if you go to some places on earth, wallahi, every street corner, you go to the middle of the jungles, and you will find people have built a mausoleum or a structure or a pagan temple, and you look and you see there's a rock with red painting or yellow painting on it. Just a rock. And you find people putting meat in front of the rock and putting butter and putting, sweets in front of the rock. And it's mind-boggling that to this day, people can act like this. That they're going to give their acts of worship, they're going to prostrate, they're going to lower their heads to a wood or a rock or a stone. And when you read this, you wonder, subhanAllah, but then you see it with your own two eyes and you see, no, this is still here. And then we talk about those who do this in our own religion, in our own culture. There are some Muslims who do the same with graves, with saints, with mausoleums. The same thing. You see it in many Muslim countries. You go and you find Muslims literally bowing their head down in front of the grave of a saint, of a wali, of a pir, doing tawaf around the grave. And you wonder, where is La ilaha illallah? This is exactly what the Jahili Arabs did. One of the most disgusting stories, to be honest, is that of Na'ila and Asaf. Na'ila and Asaf. Na'ila and Asaf were two idols. Na'ila was put on Safa and Asaf was put on Marwa. And so the Quraysh, when they did tawaf, they would touch Na'ila and Asaf when they're going back and forth. When Islam came, the Muslims felt hesitant. How can we do sa'i when it's meant to commemorate Na'ila and Asaf? So Allah revealed in the Quran, the verses that we all know, Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. Safa and Marwa are holy before Na'ila and Asaf were put there. Safa and Marwa are from the signs of Allah, before Na'ila and Asaf ever came. Safa and Marwa are from the signs of Allah. So whoever does Hajj, then let him, there is no sin on you if you do tawaf, i.e. sa'i, between them. There's no sin, meaning don't feel guilty. There's no evil in Safa and Marwa. What is Na'il and Asaf? Aisha says that since we were children, we were hearing the story of Na'il and Asaf, the legends that they have. Na'il and Asaf, may Allah forgive us for even narrating such disgusting things, but this is what the books of history say. They were two lovers, male and female. Na'il and Asaf, Asaf is the male and Na'il is the female. There were two lovers, and they could not find a place to be intimate because they were not married, except the interior of the Kaaba. So they consummated their romance inside the Kaaba. And as a punishment, Allah destroyed them and solidified and petrified them right then and there. Now when the Quraysh came across them, they actually took them as a miracle. And they put these two on Safa and Marwa. And that is why the Muslims said, how can we do sa'i between Safa and Marwa? So Allah said, look, Safa and Marwa have nothing to do with Na'ila and Asaf. So this is the story of Na'ila and Asaf. Again, it shows you the paganism that the Jahili Arabs were upon. And we also know that when the Prophet ﷺ conquered Mecca, there were around 360 idols around the Kaaba. 360 idols of various shapes and sizes. Some idols were in the shape of full humans. Some were in the shape of animals. Most of them were in the shape of half human, half animal. And you know, to this day, the children's fairy tales, half horse and half, human and half lion, and just like the Sphinx of Egypt or, the centaurs, this type of theology. We read in the books of history that most of these idols were humanoid. A little bit of human, a little bit of animal. And they would then put these statues around the Kaaba. Also, we learn that the Quraysh had the theology that Allah has daughters, and that these daughters are His angels. And they would worship the angels. They would worship the angels thinking that these are the daughters of Allah. So they would consider the angels to be the daughters of Allah. Now the Arabs did not have a specified theology. They didn't have a creed. We as Muslims, we have a creed. We believe in Allah and the angels, the Day of Judgment, Qadr. We have a creed. We need to understand that societies that are idolatrous, paganistic societies, they don't have creeds. For example, Hindus are the most clear example of an idolatrous religion. Hindus don't have creeds. If you ask 10 different Hindus what their religion is, you'll get 10 different answers, right? Because there is no unified creed. There's no aqidah, as we call it. And one Hindu can worship one God, another can worship another God, and you can have 6 million Hindus worshipping 6 million gods, different. And each one has a different perception of what his God can or cannot do. This is all legit in their religion because there's no unified creed. The same goes for the Arabs, that there was no unified creed. Many of them believed in a Day of Judgment, many of them denied it. Many of them believed this, many of them didn't. There's no unified creed. But the one thing that they all agreed upon is that we need to worship these idols to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have some form of idolatry.
فيا ذلي ويا خجلي إذا ما قال لي ربي أما استحييته تعصيني ولا تخشى من العتب وتخفي الذنب عن خلقي وتأبى في الهوى قربي فتب مما جنيت عسى تعود إلى رضا الرب تعود إلى رضا الرب